You know that feeling, right?
Hmm?
It's, I don't know, 8:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. You've just finished a perfectly reasonable, nutritious dinner. You are full. Your stomach is physically distended. All your biological systems are flashing these green lights, just saying, we are at capacity. Thank you for your service. But then you walk past the kitchen counter and you see it.
Oh, yeah. The leftover slice of pizza or the open bag of chips.
Exactly. It has this gravitational pull. It's completely irrational. You know you don't need it. You aren't even hungry. But you take one bite,
Just one.
then another, and suddenly 20 minutes later, you're lying on the couch staring at the ceiling. You've had to unbutton your jeans and you're just questioning every single life choice you've ever made, trapped in the absolute misery of a food coma.
It's the universal human condition, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's that internal civil war between the brain that knows better and the stomach that just wants more.
it really is.
And honestly, in those moments, it feels less like a biological function and more like a hostile takeover of your own body.
Right. And usually when we talk about this, we frame it as a diet problem. We say, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that because of the calories, or, I'm going to ruin my macros. We treat it as a cosmetic issue or a health metric.
Sure.
But today we are going completely off the beaten path. We are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating lecture by a speaker named Amjad Samir, who is dissecting this classic text called The Path of the Seekers.
Which was originally penned by a medieval scholar, a man named Ibn al-Jawzi.
Yeah.
And I have to say, this is not a weight loss seminar.
Yeah.
If you're listening for tips on how to get six-pack abs, this probably isn't it. This is something much, much deeper.
It really is. It's almost like a philosophical crime scene investigation. But before we jump in, we kind of need to set the ground rules for this specific deep dive. The source material it's deeply rooted in Islamic theology and tradition. It's full of specific terminology from that world.
Right.
But our mission today is to look at this through a purely universal lens.
Exactly. We want to see if the psychology holds up without the labels.
Yeah.
So we made a conscious choice to strip away the original language. We aren't going to use any of the foreign terms or religious jargon today. We're really trying to translate this ancient wisdom into plain, actionable English.
Just to get at the raw human experience underneath it all.
Yeah. We want to know, does this medieval advice actually help a modern person living in Chicago or London navigate their cravings? Can it still work?
I love that challenge because when you strip away the cultural context, human nature is just human nature. The hardware hasn't changed in 1,000 years.
Not at all.
We're still just hairless apes trying to figure out why we can't stop eating cookies. And the core thesis we are looking at today is, well, it's intense. The source argues that the stomach is the spring of all afflictions.
The spring of all afflictions. It's such a heavy title. It sounds almost melodramatic until you start to actually trace the lines he draws.
It sounds like a clickbait title from the 12th century, But they aren't just talking about physical afflictions like heartburn or indigestion. They mean everything.
Everything.
They claim that your inability to focus at work, your messy relationships, your obsession with money, and even social wars and envy, it all traces back to how much you ate for dinner.
Which sounds like a massive exaggeration at first glance. It really does.
Yeah.
You think, come on, how does my lunch connect to my desire for a promotion or, my jealousy of a neighbor?
Yeah.
It feels like such a stretch.
It feels like a huge stretch. If I'm jealous of my coworker Bob because he got the corner office, my first thought isn't, man, I really shouldn't have had that extra taco.
No. Usually it isn't. But when we start to unpack the logic or the chain of desire as the source lays it out, it starts to make a frightening amount of sense.
How so?
It posits that the stomach is the engine room. And if that engine is running too hot, the whole ship just goes off course.
Okay, so the mission for this deep dive is to figure out, is the stomach really the villain of the story? And if it is, how do we stop it from ruining our lives? Because the source suggests that we are just, fighting symptoms while totally ignoring the disease.
And honestly, the aha moment for me came pretty early on. The source suggests that we view our desires as this domino effect.
Okay.
And if you knock over the first domino, which is always the stomach, the rest of them, they just fall inevitably. You can't stop the last domino if you've already tipped the first one.
Right, let's unpack this. Let's go to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
The source starts with a pretty famous origin story to set the scene. And it's a story most people know, regardless of their background.
Right. It goes all the way back to Adam.
Yeah.
The expulsion from paradise. The source highlights something very specific here. The very first failure of mankind wasn't caused by murder.
Okay.
It wasn't caused by greed for gold. It wasn't caused by violence or some lust for power. It was caused by eating.
The forbidden fruit. It's literally the oldest story in the book.
Exactly. But think about the implication of that. The scholar argues that this single act sets the precedent for all of human history. The stomach is the gateway to loss.
The gateway to loss.
It is the primal vulnerability. Before humans ever fought a war or stole a coin, they failed to control their appetite.
That's a really interesting framing. I mean, we usually think of that story as being about disobedience or pride, maybe curiosity, but framing it specifically about eating, that changes the whole perspective.
It does.
It makes the stomach the original traitor.
It is the traitor. It's the breach in the wall. The source's logic is, if you can't control what goes into your mouth, which is the most basic biological interaction you have with the world, you have effectively opened the city gates to every other enemy.
Right.
If you can't say no to a piece of fruit, how are you going to say no to money or to power or to illicit affairs?
So it's the foundational discipline. If that one brick is loose, the whole wall eventually comes down.
Precisely. And that leads us to this domino effect, or the chain of reaction that the source describes. The author calls the stomach the fountainhead. So let's just walk through the steps they lay out. It's a 5-step process to total ruin. And I want to go through this slowly because the logic is it's ruthless.
Okay, walk us through it. Step 1 is obviously eating, but surely eating itself isn't the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to eat to live.
Of course, eating isn't the problem. Step 1 is satiety, but not just, I'm not hungry anymore. It's eating until you are completely, totally full, stuffed.
Okay.
The source argues that when the stomach is full, the body generates a surplus of energy. It creates a certain wildness or exuberance.
Wildness. That's a really evocative word.
It is. Think about a child who eats a ton of sugar. They don't sit down and quietly read a book.
No, they bounce off the wall.
They bounce off the walls. The force argues adults are exactly the same. When the stomach is stuffed, you aren't sedated, you are fueled up. The beast has been fed, and now it wants to play. It creates an excess of energy that needs to go somewhere.
Okay, so I've got a full tank of gas and a little bit of this wild energy. I'm feeling good. What's step 2?
Step 2 is intimacy, or more specifically, the desire of the private parts.
Okay.
The source posits a direct biological link here. They argue that excess food directly fuels the drive for procreation and lust.
Is that medically true, or is that just, puritanical scolding?
No, there's actually a biological logic to it. If the stomach is empty, the body goes into survival mode. It conserves energy. It says, okay, shut down non-essential systems, we need to find food.
Right.
But if the stomach is stuffed, the body signals that resources are abundant. It says, we are safe, we have plenty of fuel, now is a great time to reproduce.
So a full stomach equals an active libido.
Exactly. Gluttony births lust. The source says that these two desires are twins. You rarely see one without the other. If you are constantly indulging your taste buds, you are priming your body to indulge its other physical urges.
Okay, I can follow that. Biological abundance leads to biological urges. That makes sense. But this is where I usually get lost with these old philosophies. How do we get from I want to have sex to I want to be a millionaire? What is step 3?
Well, step 3 is the desire for money. And this is the pivot point.
How?
To satisfy the stomach, because now you want fancy food, not just dry bread, and to satisfy the private parts, which implies marriage, dating, courtship, or even illicit affairs, you need resources.
But wait, hold on. Does a burger really lead to greed? I can eat a lot of cheap food. I can be a glutton on a budget. This feels like a bit of a leap.
That's a fair pushback. But think about what we call lifestyle creep. This scholar isn't just talking about volume. He's talking about the quality of the desire. Once you indulge the stomach, the palate refines itself.
You don't want the gruel anymore?
Exactly. You don't want the gruel. You want the seasoned meat. You want the dessert. In regard of the desire of private parts, let's be real. Relationships are expensive. A dowry costs money. A date costs money. Maintaining a household costs a lot of money.
So you're saying the appetite demands a supply chain?
That's the perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
The appetite demands a supply chain. You cannot support a lifestyle of fine dining and romance on $0. So this births the need for wealth. You aren't seeking money just to swim in coins like Scrooge McDuck. You are seeking money to fund the operations of step 1 and step 2.
Okay, that makes more sense. It's the cost of appetites. The more I want to consume, the more I need to earn.
Right. And now that you are desperate for money, you move on to step 4.
Which is?
Power and status. Because how do you get the most money?
You climb the ladder.
You need influence. You need a high-ranking job. You need to be the boss. You need social standing. The source argues that the pursuit of money to feed the first 2 desires inevitably leads to a hunger for prestige. You need to secure your position to secure your resources.
It's an escalation of stakes. I started just wanting lunch, and now I need to be the CEO so I can afford the lunch I've decided I deserve.
And that leads us to the final cliff. Step 5, social decay.
Social decay from lunch.
From lunch. Once you have people competing for status, money, and power, what do you get?
Conflict.
You get envy, you get rivalry, you get hatred, you get conflict. The source explicitly states that all these complex social emotions, jealousy of your coworker, hatred of your rival, the bitterness of being overlooked, are actually just the great-grandchildren of a full stomach.
That is wild. It's backward mapping. So let's go back to my example. I'm sitting in my office seething with jealousy because Bob from accounting got the promotion and I didn't. This scholar would say, don't look at Bob, look at your dinner plate.
Exactly. They would say you are fighting a downstream battle. You think you have an envy problem, but the source says, no, you have a stomach problem that has metastasized.
Walk me through that backward chain again for the listener, just to make it crystal clear.
Okay. You hate Bob. That's step 5, because he got the status. Step 4.
Right.
You wanted that status because it provides the money. Step 3, you need the money because you have unchecked desires for food and intimacy. Steps 1 and 2. If you had controlled the stomach back at step 1, if you were content with simple bread and water, you wouldn't need all that extra money. If you didn't need the money, you wouldn't care so much about the status. And if you didn't care about the status, Bob's promotion wouldn't bother you. You'd be free.
That is a holistic view of human psychology that we so rarely see. We usually treat these things as separate silos. I have an eating problem, and I have a spending problem, and I have an anger problem. Echoing through your entire life.
It's the spring of afflictions. A spring is where the water comes from. If the water is poisoned at the source, the whole river is poisonous.
Right.
You can try to filter the water downriver, which is like taking anger management classes or financial planning courses. But as long as that spring is pumping out poison, you're always going to lose.
I have to admit, I'm skeptical that it's always that simple, but the logic is incredibly compelling. It connects the physical body to the social world in a way I hadn't really thought about before.
It forces you to take responsibility for the smallest actions, because they might just have the biggest consequences.
So we've established that the stomach is the bad guy. But let's talk about the mechanics of this, because the source gets into some really quirky, but honestly kind of brilliant physiology. The medieval view of the stomach it's very vivid.
Oh, the expanding food theory. I loved this part. It's such a tangible way to visualize what's happening during digestion.
Yeah, so the medieval scholar Ibn al-Jawzi, he has this theory that food unfolds in the stomach.
Right. He says food has a property of expansion or unfolding over time. Now, obviously, he didn't have an MRI machine or anything, but he's describing a sensation we all know. He says if you eat until you feel full while you are still sitting at the table, you have already made a huge mistake.
Why? I thought if I'm full, I stop. That's the rule, right?
No, that's the trap. He argues that the food you just swallowed hasn't unfolded yet. Think of it like one of those compressed sponges you drop in water. It takes a minute to soak up the water and expand to its full size. He warns that if you stop when you feel full, then 20 minutes later, that food is going to expand and you're going to move from full to in pain. You'll feel that distress, that heaviness, and that gross stretched feeling.
It's that feeling where you have to unbutton your pants and just lay there. I've made a huge mistake.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating is that the speaker, Amjad Samir, he connects this ancient theory to a very modern medical concept. He talks about the satiety sensor delay.
Right, and modern science backs this up completely.
It does. We know now about hormones like ghrelin, which makes you hungry, and leptin, which tells you you're full. But there's a lag time. It takes roughly 20 minutes for the chemical signals from your stomach to reach your brain and say, hey, we're done here.
It's like sending a text message with bad reception. It sends, but it doesn't arrive for 20 minutes.
That is the perfect analogy. So you keep eating. You're asking the brain, are we full yet? And the brain says, no text yet, keep eating. So you eat 2 more slices of pizza. Then, 20 minutes later, the text finally arrives. But by then, you've overloaded the system. You've actually been overeating for the last 20 minutes. You just didn't know it.
So the source's advice is completely counterintuitive. You have to stop eating before you feel full.
Yes.
You have to stop while you still want more.
You have to stop while the food still tastes the best. That is the discipline. If you wait for that click of satisfaction, you have gone way too far.
That requires so much trust, though. You have to trust that in 20 minutes you will feel full, even though right now you still feel hungry. It's a leap of faith.
It is. It's acting on knowledge rather than on sensation. And the source adds another layer to this physiology, which is, frankly, terrifying. Stomach elasticity.
The balloon analogy.
Right. They describe the stomach as a flexible container. And the danger of chronic fullness is that the stomach stretches. The source explains that if a person used to be satisfied with one loaf of bread, but they keep stuffing themselves, the stomach physically expands.
It accommodates the new volume.
It does. And now, that one loaf of bread, which used to be plenty, it doesn't even touch the sides. You feel empty. So now you need 1.5 loaves just to reach that baseline feeling of not hungry.
It's inflation. It's stomach inflation.
It is. You are devaluing the currency of your own food. You need more and more input to get the same feeling of satiety. And the source warns that this leads to a cycle of increasing consumption just to feel normal, which eventually leads to obesity and all sorts of health issues. You are effectively training your body to be insatiable.
And once you stretch it, it's really hard to shrink it back. You've set a new, higher baseline for happiness.
Exactly. You've raised the cost of your own survival.
This leads us perfectly into section 3 because we have to talk about the rule of thirds. I feel like anyone who has ever dabbled in this kind of spiritual tradition or even just modern health advice has heard this famous maxim.
Oh, yeah?
1/3 for food, 1/3 for drink, 1/3 for breath.
It's the gold standard, right? It's on all the wellness blogs.
Yeah, I honestly thought that was the goal. Like, if I'm being really pious and disciplined, I do the 1/3 rule. I feel proud of myself when I do that. But the expert in our source material, he drops a bomb on this.
He really does. He corrects a massive, massive misconception. He explains that according to the source text, this rule of thirds is not the ideal state.
Wait, really? It's not the goal?
No. It is actually the maximum limit for those who lack self-control. It's the backup plan. It's the safety net for people who just can't stop.
So the rule that we all think is the strict diet is actually the participation trophy level.
Basically. Yeah. It's for people who say, I can't help myself, I love food too much. And the text says, okay, look, if you must eat more, then at the absolute maximum, stop at 1/3. Do not fill the whole thing. But that is not the target.
So what is the target? What is the actual gold standard then?
The source quotes the central figure of the tradition as saying this: "It is sufficient for the son of Adam to have a few bites to keep his back straight."
A few bites?
A few bites. The word used is luquimat. Just enough to keep your spine erect so you don't collapse from hunger.
That sounds impossible. I mean, that sounds like starvation to a modern ear. A few bites. That's an appetizer for most of us.
It sounds extreme to us because we're so accustomed to abundance. We live in a world where full is the goal. But the source defines the ideal as eating only enough to maintain function. They treat food purely as fuel.
Utilitarian.
Purely utilitarian. You calculate exactly what you need to worship, to work, and to function. Anything beyond that is excess.
It's like putting gas in a car. You don't keep pumping gas once the tank is full just because the gas smells good.
The speaker used a great analogy for this. He called it the 2001st calorie.
Oh, I like this. Break that down.
He says, imagine you need exactly 2,000 units of energy to fulfill your duties for the day. Your job, your prayers, your family obligations.
Yeah.
Science says you need 2,000.
Okay.
If you take that 2001st calorie, technically, philosophically, that single calorie is gluttony.
Even 1 calorie.
Even one.
Yeah.
Because you took something you didn't need. It serves no purpose other than pleasure. It is, by definition, waste.
That is a ruthless standard. It completely changes the definition of gluttony from eating until you explode to eating anything that doesn't serve a specific purpose. It turns eating into an engineering problem.
And that leads to this metaphor the source uses, which I found really poetic. It says, the believer eats in one intestine, while the unbeliever eats in 7.
Now, obviously, we checked the anatomy books before this deep dive. Humans do not have 7 intestines.
Agrees. No, we checked. Just 1. And the speaker clarifies this immediately. It's not literal anatomy. It's a metaphor for attitude and for spiritual orientation.
So what does the 1 intestine represent?
The 1 intestine person is the one who is spiritually aware. They are satisfied with very little. They see food as utility. They fill the tank, and they move on.
And the 7 intestines?
That is the materialist, the person who is defined by their appetites. They are never satisfied. No matter how much they consume, they always have 6 empty intestines crying out for more. It symbolizes a hole in the soul that food is trying to fill.
It reminds me of that idea of the hungry ghost in some Eastern traditions. The ghost with the tiny mouth and the giant stomach that can never be filled.
Exactly.
You can never fill the void with matter.
Precisely. The source is saying that if you are trying to fill a spiritual void with pizza, you will need infinite pizza. The seven intestines represent an attitude of consumption where nothing is ever enough. And we see that today, don't we?
We do.
We have more food than ever in human history, yet we are constantly looking for the next flavor, the next trend, the next meal.
Yeah.
We are the people of the seven intestines.
That's a sobering thought. We are trying to solve a soul problem with a stomach solution.
And it never, ever works.
Okay, so we have the chain reaction of desire, we have the physiology of the expanding stomach, and we have the myth of the 1/3 rule. But what happens to your brain when you ignore all this? Section 4 delves into the impact on the mind and spirit. And this hit home for me because they talk about the food coma in a way that felt very, very personal.
The brain fog.
Yeah.
The source gets into the consequences of a full stomach on your cognitive ability. They mention dullness of the mind and excessive sleep.
We've all been there, the afternoon slump. You have a big lunch, maybe a burger and fries, and you go back to your desk at 2 p.m., and suddenly your IQ has dropped 20 points. You're just staring at a spreadsheet, but nothing is happening in your head.
The lights are on, but nobody's home. The source offers two explanations for this. One is the ancient view, talking about vapors reaching the brain, which is, medieval science. We can probably set that aside.
Right.
But they also mention the modern medical view, which is that blood is diverted from the brain to the stomach to aid digestion.
The resource allocation problem again?
Right. Your body has limited resources. Digestion is an incredibly energy-intensive process. If you dump a massive meal into the system, the body screams, "All hands on deck" in the stomach, and it has to pull blood and oxygen away from the brain.
So you literally become dumber because you ate too much.
You do.
Yeah.
The source says the result is that you cannot think clearly, you cannot remember things, and crucially for this text, you cannot perform spiritual acts with any focus. You can't meditate or pray if you are fighting to stay awake. You become spiritually numb because you are physically overwhelmed.
There was a story in the lecture that really illustrated how serious they took this. The story of Uqba and the sage. Can you retell that? It feels like a real clash of civilizations moment.
Oh, this is a great anecdote. So a man named Uqba visits a famous sage named Hassan al-Basri. This is a meeting of a regular guy and his spiritual giant. The sage is eating and invites Uqba to join him. "Come, eat with me." It's a standard polite gesture.
Right. And Uqba politely declines.
He declines, and he says, "I have eaten until I cannot eat anymore."
Now, in our culture, if I said that to you, you'd probably say, "Oh, nice, must have been a good meal." Being stuffed is a compliment to the chef. It's a sign of a successful dinner party.
Exactly. But the sage's reaction is total shock and horror. He explains, "Glory be to God, does a Muslim eat until they cannot eat anymore?"
He was horrified.
He was genuinely disturbed by it. To this sage, eating to absolute capacity wasn't just unhealthy, it was shameful. It was like admitting to a crime. He saw it as a loss of human dignity. Like, why would you treat your body like a garbage bag that you just stuff until it rips?
It really highlights the cultural shift. For us, stuffed is a sign of abundance and a good time. For them, stuffed was a sign of a loss of control, a surrender to your animal nature.
It was a sign that you had let the servant, the stomach, become the master.
And they had practical ways to avoid this, too. The lecture mentions something called the slave's posture. This sounded uncomfortable, but I can totally see the logic.
Yes. It describes how they would sit while eating. Now, picture how we eat. We sit in comfy chairs, maybe we lean back. If we eat a lot, we unbuckle the belt, we create space.
We optimize for consumption.
They optimize for restriction. They would sit on the floor with one leg folded up against their stomach.
So your knee is basically digging into your gut the whole time.
Exactly. It physically compresses the stomach. It reduces the volume of the container. So as you eat, you feel the pressure of the food against your thigh much, much sooner. It physically prevents you from overeating. When you feel that pressure, you stop.
It's like a gastric band, but it's just your own leg.
It is. And the speaker notes that when people want to eat a lot, they sit cross-legged, they sprawl out to relax the stomach. This posture was a deliberate constraint. They designed their physical position to enforce their moral discipline.
That is fascinating. It's designing your environment, or in this case, your posture, to make the bad habit more difficult. But I have to ask the question that I'm sure some listeners are thinking right now.
Go for it.
If food is the enemy and eating leads to all these problems, social decay, stupidity, lust, should we just starve ourselves? Is the goal to be an ascetic who never eats? I mean, is the answer anorexia? Because that sounds really dangerous.
That is the dangerous trap. And Section 5 covers this, the trap of asceticism within asceticism. The host poses this exact question: is the answer to just stop eating? And the source gives a very firm no.
They warn against extreme.
They do. The source warns against extreme hunger that weakens the body. They explicitly say that if you starve yourself to the point where your mind is fuzzy from hunger, or you are too weak to work or pray, you've also failed.
So if you're too hungry to focus, that's just as bad as being too full to focus.
Exactly. The goal is function. You need strength to fulfill your purpose. There's a specific mention of a famous companion, Abu Huraira, who used to faint from hunger. And the speaker clarifies, don't look at him and say, oh, I should do that to be holy. He was fainting because he was in extreme poverty. It wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was his circumstance. So don't emulate the suffering of poverty if you have the means to be healthy.
It's about balance. The Goldilocks zone. Not too full, not too empty, just enough fuel to keep the machine running smoothly.
But then there was a psychological twist here that I found so devious. The vanity of asceticism. This is where the source really digs into the psychology of the ego.
This is the hanging food story, right? This blew my mind.
Yes. The text mentions this trap where some people would buy delicious food, sweets, roasted meat, all the good stuff, and they would hang it up in their house.
Just hang it there, like it was art.
Hang it there, right in the main room, and they wouldn't eat it.
Why? To torture themselves, to test their willpower.
No. To show off. The goal was to have visitors come over. The visitor sees the delicious lamb hanging there, and they see that the host isn't eating it.
Oh, I see. It's a flex.
It's a massive flex. The message is, look at this amazing food I can afford, and look at how disciplined and spiritual I am that I'm not touching it. I am above this food.
That is the ultimate humble brag. That is next level narcissism.
It is. It's what we might call virtue signaling today, or performance piety. The source calls this buying the desire and hanging it up, and the verdict is harsh. They say this is the vanity of asceticism.
Because you aren't doing it for God and you aren't doing it for health. You're doing it for the likes.
Exactly. You are feeding the ego while starving the stomach. And the source argues that gluttony of the ego is far worse than gluttony of the stomach. They say it would be better to be humble and just eat the food than to starve yourself just to get applause from your neighbors.
That is a profound check on your intention. It forces you to ask, why am I dieting? Why am I fasting? Is it for discipline? Or is it so I can tell everyone about my discipline?
Right. If you're posting about your fast on Instagram, are you really fasting? That's the modern version of hanging the meat on the wall.
Ouch. Okay, I feel a little called out. So we've covered the problem, which is the chain of desire. We've covered the science, the expanding stomach. We've covered the myths, the rule of thirds, and the traps, like vanity. Now we need the solution. How do we actually break the cycle? The learner listening to this is probably thinking, okay, I buy it, my stomach is the problem, but I love pizza, what do I do now? Section 6 gives us the training regimen.
And the first rule is gradualism. The source explicitly advises against going cold turkey.
So if I'm eating 3 burgers a day, don't switch to 1 carrot tomorrow.
Exactly. If you switch from 3 loaves of bread to 1 bite instantly, you will fail. Your body will rebel, you will get headaches, you will get hangry, and eventually you will binge.
You'll snap back like a rubber band.
Right. The method is gradual reduction over time. You are training the stomach to shrink. Now remember, we said that stomach is elastic. It took time to stretch it. It will take time to shrink it.
It's like tapering off a drug. You have to step it down slowly.
It is exactly that.
Yeah.
You cut out 1 bite, then 2 bites, then half a loaf, slowly lowering the baseline until your stomach accepts the new normal. The speaker suggests taking weeks or even months to do this properly.
And then there is the stop while you want more rule. This feels like the hardest mental hurdle of all.
This is what the source calls the station of justice in eating. It means lifting your hand from the food while you still have an appetite.
While the food still tastes good,
Yeah.
while that last slice of pizza is calling your name.
Yes. You don't stop because the plate is empty. You don't stop because you are full. You start by choice. This requires immense willpower, but this is the only way to prevent that expanding food pain we talked about earlier. You had to leave room for the expansion.
It's about separating the act of eating from the feeling of fullness. You stop based on volume, not on sensation.
Exactly. And finally, they talk about fasting with purpose. And this is a critique of how many people fast today. I think this applies to intermittent fasting too, which is
Right.
so popular right now.
Yes. The source critiques the feast after the fast.
Right. People fast all day, they discipline themselves, they feel great. But as soon as the sun goes down or their eating window opens, What do?
They raid the fridge like there's no tomorrow.
They make up for it. They eat double what they normally would.
It's the buffet mentality. I suffered all day, so I earned this.
Right. But the source says if you do that, you have accomplished absolutely nothing. You haven't broken the desire. You've just delayed it. You just pushed the pause button, and now you're hitting fast forward.
So what's the fix? How should you break a fast?
The fix is, when you break a fast, eat less than you would on a normal day. That is the only way to actually break the power of the stomach. You have to prove to the stomach that it's not in charge. You don't owe it a reward for doing its job.
Wow. That turns the whole concept of a celebratory meal on its head. It requires a complete mental shift. You aren't fasting to earn a feast. You're fasting to learn to live without the feast.
It changes food from a reward into a utility. And that, according to the source, is the ultimate freedom.
So let's wrap this up. We started with a full stomach, and we ended up with social conflict, ego traps, and spiritual discipline. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. I think the main lesson here, the real so what, is that we tend to think of ourselves as consumers of food. We eat the food. But this text suggests that more often than not, the food consumes us.
The food consumes us.
It consumes our energy through digestion. It consumes our focus through brain fog. And eventually, through that whole chain reaction of desire, from lust to money to status, it consumes our time and our peace of mind.
That's a powerful way to put it. We are being eaten by our own appetites.
And if we can reclaim control over that first domino, the stomach, we might find that the rest of our life starts to fall into place. We might find we have more patience, less envy, and a clearer mind. The road to a better life might actually start on your dinner plate.
It's a compelling argument. And I want to leave the listener with a final thought, something to chew on, pun definitely intended, based on everything we've read today. If the stomach is the spring of all afflictions, then the spoon is the tool that digs the riverbed. So next time you sit down to eat, ask yourself, are you fueling a machine? Or are you feeding a desire that will ask for something bigger, like your money or your peace of mind tomorrow?
That's the question.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.